Welcome to the Bio-181 Tutoring Center videos. Today we're going to be talking about human activity and how it has impacted nutrient cycling, energy flow, and just ecosystems in general. So a lot of things we talk about might be kind of depressing, but hang in there because there is a small light at the end of the tunnel of this video. So the first thing is nutrient enrichment. So humans have been adding nutrients to certain ecosystems because of agricultural needs. So we have developed a very big industry of agriculture to feed the human population, and as we do this, we are depleting the nitrogen in the soil, and so we need to replace it so that we can continue growing with the crops that we need. But that can have some detrimental effects on aquatic ecosystems, because as some of that excess nitrogen from fertilizer is draining into these aquatic systems, it allows certain bacteria and prokaryotes that used to be kind of kept at bay or controlled amounts to blossom and to grow kind of out of control. And then as a result, it leads to oxygen depletion, and then that oxygen that other organisms within the aquatic biome, such as fish and wildlife like that, aren't able to survive, and they'll die off. And so that can be a really big problem as we're decreasing these organisms. It drastically affects the rest of the ecosystem. And so that's where this idea of critical load comes into play, is that these autotrophs can only take in so much of some nutrients before it starts to have detrimental effects on everything else. The next one is acid precipitation. So as we're burning fossil fuels, we're releasing different things into the atmosphere, and then they're forming different acids that are mixing with rain, and they'll fall down as precipitation or acid rain. And that also affects ecosystems, because certain organisms can only tolerate certain pHs, or plants need certain pHs in order for them to grow properly. And then also, as we're adding this acid rain back into the oceans, that's changing the acidity of the ocean, release lakes, and that causes further problems. We've been trying to figure out some kind of ways to fix this. Some lakes are less susceptible to being changed by acid rain because of a bicarbonate buffer, so bicarbonate that's in the water that precipitated out of different rocks and things like that, and sediments. But it's still a problem, and so there's still some more action that's going to need to be taken place to reduce acid precipitation. Another one is toxins. We've been adding a lot of chemicals, harmful chemicals, into the environment that we have synthesized ourselves. And one of the major problems that arises from this is biological magnification. So this is the idea where that harmful toxins become more concentrated as we increase into trophic levels. So if you have some small primary consumer that gets some of this toxin inside them, that's not going to be highly concentrated, that toxin. But as we go into higher trophic levels, those organisms need to eat more of the things at the bottom to sustain themselves. And so if we had just one bug with a little bit of this toxin in it, but then we have some secondary consumer that's eating a ton of these bugs, now it has a higher concentration of that in it. And then if we have something even higher up that's eating a ton of that secondary consumer, now there's even a higher concentration of that toxin in that organism, and that can be harmful to it. And so we've seen this with DDT, which was a pest control, and as it got up to the higher levels of birds and things, it had a negative impact on their ability to reproduce, and it caused decrease in levels of these birds and things. And so there's been action taken against DDT, so this no longer is as big of a problem, but biological magnification really shows us how damaging toxins can be to tertiary consumers. Now we're going to move on to the greenhouse gases and the global warming. This is something you probably are more familiar with, but we'll go on into anyway. We have noticed that we've had a rise in CO2 levels in our atmosphere of late. This is a result of burning fossil fuels again for gas and oil and things like that. And there's kind of some potential benefits, but there's a lot more consequences, negative consequences of this. So kind of one potential benefit that we've looked at is that as we have an increase of CO2 levels in the atmosphere, we have an increase in plant productivity because that's one of the limiting nutrients is for photosynthesis, is we have to be able to continue taking in CO2. And so scientists have actually done experiments where they've increased CO2 levels around plants and measured whether they had increased productivity or not. And they found that they do have some increased productivity, but it's not as much as they thought because nutrients can still be limiting. So even though the plant is having a little bit more productivity, it still is not as productive as they thought because there's things that it can't get enough of to outmatch the rise in CO2. Well, what we have seen is this idea of the greenhouse effect or global warming. So we've noticed that there's a correlation as we have an increase in the rise of CO2 levels, we have an increase in our temperature. And we've even done experiments where we've looked at CO2 levels in the past by looking at glacial ice. They take these ice cores and compared it to ancient temperatures. And we've seen this correlation throughout all of Earth's history as well. And so why this increases the temperature is that the CO2 kind of acts as a blanket to Earth. As light comes in to Earth, some of it will try to come back out, but as it comes back out, it will get reflected back down to Earth from the CO2 level. And that can be beneficial because if we didn't have that kind of greenhouse effect, we would lose a lot more of our heat back out into space, and Earth would be much colder and we'd be able to stay in life. So the greenhouse effect isn't bad in and of itself, but as we increase the CO2, we're decreasing the amount of light that's actually able to leave, and so we're increasing the amount of, heat that's able to leave, and so we're increasing the amount of heat that's staying around Earth. And as we do this, we're increasing the global temperature. So what's the consequence of increasing the global temperature? A lot of us will be like, hey, hotter weather, great, we get out of Rexford's cold winters, right? But that's not always the case. There's a lot of ecological consequences. The first is, as we change temperatures, different ecosystems are going to have problems. Certain organisms and plants require certain temperatures in which they function best, and as we increase temperatures, that can harm different organisms and get rid of them in their ecosystem, and then that will have effect on the rest of the organisms. It also increases the chance of fire, which isn't always good. It can destroy a lot of habitats and wreck ecosystems. And a really major one is that as we increase the temperature, we're starting to melt more of our ice caps. And with the melting of ice caps, we're having a rise in the sea level. And that may not be super bad for us because we're not near the coast, but a lot of the majority of our big cities are actually right by the ocean. So if we raise the sea level, a lot of those will actually become submerged. And so there's a lot of debate about what we need to be doing to stop global warming. Some people think there's a debate about whether global warming is happening or not. That's not true. That's what media will tell us, but most majority of scientists all agree that global warming is happening. So there's not a debate among scientists of whether it's happening or not. The big debate is what we should be doing about it. And so there's a lot of potential social and political action that needs to be taken place to stop it, but that's not really important for our study. So now we'll go on to the last topic, ozone depletion. So there's a lot of different types of light that is hitting Earth's atmosphere, and one type is UV, and that can be really damaging to us if it was able to penetrate all the way through Earth's atmosphere. However, we're protected from this ozone layer that is in Earth's atmosphere that prevents this UV from coming down. However, as of late, we've had this ozone layer start to deplete because of the addition of CFUs. So CFUs is a chemical that was used in refrigeration and manufacturing. And as they're added, it adds chlorine to our atmosphere, which will react with ozone, O3, to form O2, and then this ClO molecule. And then multiple of those will come together to be able to eventually rejuvenate Cl, and then we can continue to be depleting the O3 levels or the ozone levels in our atmosphere. And so some consequences of this is now we're allowing more harmful UV light to reach us, which can cause increase in skin cancer, it can affect our crops, it can cause DNA damage, and so there's just a lot of different consequences from the depletion of our ozone layer. The good news is that most countries have had a quick response. We have the United States, in fact, has shut off all CFCs, and so we're not really releasing a lot more of this into the atmosphere. The bad news is that the CFCs remain in the atmosphere for about 50 years, so we're going to continue to have ozone depletion even though we've stopped putting them in there because of this cycling of the chlorine back and continuing to take the O3 and change it into oxygen. And so that's kind of the gist of this lecture video. In other lecture videos, we'll go more into depth of the things that scientists are doing in conservative biology to solve these issues. So even though we have all these problems, people are becoming more and more aware of them, and we're doing stuff to try to stop them. As far as a quiz or a test goes, the main things that you're going to be responsible for are biological magnification. I can guarantee you about 99% that you're going to have a question about this on a test or a final. And then just be aware of what ozone depletion is and greenhouse gases. These things aren't going to be as much on a test. If you do see something, it's probably going to be some sort of graph or chart that you have to analyze, and it's not going to require lots of background knowledge. So don't worry too much about some of these things. But thank you so much for watching, and have a fantastic day.